You're invading another country with millions of men. Those men need millions of tons of supplies, so you need a port. But you know full well that your enemy knows that too and has turned them into fortresses. So what do? Well, you build your own port, of course, and that's exactly what the Allies did. But they didn't just build one port, that wouldn't be enough. So they built two, and they called them Mulberry Harbours. Mulberry was the code name given to these build-your-own harbours, not for any reason other than it was the next entry in the top-secret codename book. This came about when a document titled Artificial Harbours was left unattended and the decision was made to give it some level of disguise. So the two harbours would be known as Mulberry A for the Americans and Mulberry B for the British. A was built on Omaha Beach in the area of Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer and was designed to be capable of delivering 7,000 tonnes a day. Mulberry B was built here at Arromanches, then Gold Beach, and was designed to be capable of delivering 5,000 tonnes a day. Mulberry was the accumulative title given to the ports, but they consisted of floating outer breakwaters known as bombardons, static breakwaters known as corncobs. These sometimes consisted of older ships that had been purposely scuttled. Concrete caissons, phoenixes, floating piers and roadways, beetles and whales, and finally the pierheads that would receive the supplies that were known as spuds. There are also many other sections to complete the ports. Until the ports were operational, landing craft were used, but only as a temporary measure, because they were not only limited at what they could carry, but also more susceptible to adverse weather. They did continue to supplement the passage of supplies, however. So how did the idea come about? Well, after the frankly disastrous raid at the port of Dieppe in 1942, it was quickly realised that even though the German defences were in their relative infancy at that point, it would be extremely costly to try and capture a port. Not only that, but any forced landing would require a huge amount of supplies to stand a chance of operational effectiveness. Initially, the idea of building their own port was met with scepticism, but after some powerful support, most notably from Winston Churchill and Vice Admiral Lord Louis Mountbatten, it began to take shape. Three main designs were submitted and constructed for testing in Scotland, far away from the prying eyes of the Germans. Some elements were used of one of the proposals, but the one known as Transportation 5 was ultimately chosen. There was one problem. It would have to be constructed beforehand in England so they could be towed over and become operational as quickly as possible. From December 1943, when they were finally towed to France in June 1944, over 50,000 fabricators were involved, who belonged to hundreds of companies across the UK, each one being tasked to create small sections of the harbours, so essentially they would have no real idea what it was they were making. In addition to the two mulberries, 5 gooseberries were to be constructed also. These were sheltered staging areas for ships waiting to unload their supplies or to be repaired, etc. These were mostly created by sinking obsolete ships. They even included some once formidable examples like the King George V. Once in place, a series of charges below the waterline were detonated to ensure a controlled upright sinking. This would allow the upper decks to still be used and the top deck to house defensive weapons. The whole endeavour would need to be securely anchored. A Royal Engineer, Major Alan Beckett, would provide the answer. Although one of the smallest parts, it turned out to be an amazing invention, the kite anchor. A normal ship's anchor works to hold a ship in a relative location, but can become easily detached and drag along the seabed. The kite anchor, once deployed, would actually increase its depth and hold when pull was applied, digging itself further into the seabed. It was so effective the steel cables attached had to not only be adjustable to allow for tide, but an extremely strong variable tension design. Over 2,000 kite anchors were made. The ports were almost fully operational by the 19th of June, when the strongest storm for generations hit the English Channel, a test the temporary ports were not designed to withstand. Mulberry A at Omaha was almost completely destroyed, and its only main use from then on was to provide replacement parts for the British Mulberry B, that would have to take the majority of the supplies from then on. Its breakwaters would also be further reinforced from parts salvaged from A, of which very little remains at Omaha. It was envisaged the ports would need to be in use for 90 days, allowing time for the capture of a French port. They would far surpass this 90-day plan, and in fact Mulberry B would remain operational until December. The entire operation became one of the biggest feats of engineering the world has ever seen. Although very little remains of the American port, even 80 years on, you can still see the scale of it at Arromanches.